Pride of the Americas was to be a grand event, similar to the prominence of World Pride. Pandemic put a hold on all of that, and when it returned, it just couldn't seem to find its mojo. There are so many questions to ask about what happened, why, and most importantly, what is next. Pride Fort Lauderdale's President Miik Martorell is here to answer those questions. Welcome to Unapologetically Queer. I'm your host, Al Ferguson, and I am proud to talk to some of the most interesting people that are interesting to our LGBTQ plus community. This is a unique opportunity and show in that it is an unedited conversation with these newsmakers. Well, Pride of the Americas, grand plans. The world turning its LGBTQ plus eyes on Fort Lauderdale. Boy George is going to sing on the beach. It likely began because of World Pride, perhaps their snub of South Florida as a selection site, and then this plan of a Western Hemisphere alternative is announced. An estimated $500,000 or so is seeded into the project from Visit Lauderdale, the city, and other interested parties. Then came pandemic, and the world shut down. What we didn't know then, what we do know now, that this is likely what spelled the doom of this grand project. This year's Pride Fort Lauderdale, Pride of the Americas, had so many issues, all explored blow by blow in the press. In LGBTQ gossip, the board seemed to collapse, the venue changed, sponsors were lost, there were money challenges for the organization and so much more. And Pride seemed to be less than transparent in everything that was happening on these issues. That's why I am very happy Pride Fort Lauderdale's President Miik Martorell is here to answer those questions and especially to discuss what's next. Well, welcome, Miik Martorell. And first off, I understand you are unapologetically queer.
I sure am.
We get that out of the way right at the top of the show. All right. Well, tell us about first your history at Pride Fort Lauderdale. How did it happen? How long have you been, etc.?
Well, Al, thank you for allowing me to be here. You know, it's great to have a platform that can reach a lot of people, that can be seen a million times, and really it captures what is exactly happening. And there won't be any minced words. We'll know what happens. You know, whatever I tell you today, you're going to know came from me. I started volunteering with Pride for years. I guess it could be maybe in the early 2000s. I was working at the Copa, and I got involved later on when I was working at the Coliseum as a DJ. I used to DJ for them, and then with my printing company, Planet Printer, I would donate product. Eventually, I think it was 2014, I got more involved, and I haven't left ever since. So,
and you worked for Costelli at the Copa?
I actually worked for Greg Bernard.
Oh, okay.
not as far back as Costelli.
Okay,
but yeah.
All right. I wasn't sure. To me, the most endearing thing about your story, since I've been in South Florida, is the number of prides that you've traveled to. You have literally been an ambassador for South Florida's LGBTQ plus community. Tell me about that and your desire to represent South Florida at so many prides all over the world.
You know, when I came into Pride, the one thing I noticed is that there was a lot of negativity about our organization. And it wasn't because the people before weren't paying attention. It's just, I think, that they weren't seeing what our organization can do. I also got into a situation where I didn't know how to run a Pride per se. So I learned from others. And I thought, why don't I use my frequent flyer miles, which I have plenty of, because I pay for everything on my frequent flyer, you know, my Southwest card. And we started traveling around, going to different cities and saying, hey, I just want to show up. Maybe we can put a booth up so we can promote our event, but I want to come up and help. And so we went to North Carolina, Atlanta, New York, Dallas, Palm Springs, Las Vegas, and then international destinations like Suriname. You probably wouldn't even realize that Suriname has a pride, but boy, was it a beautiful one. And the whole community comes together for that. Then there's Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Rio de Janeiro and Jamaica, which some people still are surprised has a pride, but they've had one for, I think, 8 or 10 years now. But I think the thing that really was the most exciting was being at Buenos Aires. And I tell this story all the time. Even the president of the organization from them, I was talking to her about it, and she was like, "Wow, you know so much." I said, "Because it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." They start out their event at Plaza Mayor, or sorry, it's Casa Rosada, which is the pink house, and they take a stage and make demands of the government. Then they take those demands in a parade form and go down about a mile or so to Plaza Mayor, which is the Congress, and they deliver those demands to Congress. It's the most symbolic, beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Literally a march.
It is literally, it is everything that we know it to be.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that, but how appropriate that experience being one of your favorites in this year in 2023 in terms of the need for marching. And speaking of that, before we get into talking about all of the issues related to Pride Fort Lauderdale, there's a lot going on in our world, especially here in Florida. The most anti-LGBT politician likely in history is now running for president of the United States. What do you think about, from your seat representing the Pride organization in Fort Lauderdale? And that's saying a lot. We're one of the gayest communities in America, in the world. What do you think about what you're watching in the politics of queer in America?
It's disgusting. We're being used as pawns for this guy to win an election. I don't care what side of the table you're on. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. You should never put us in a situation where we're turned against each other. What he's doing is unforgivable. And I hope that it backfires on him. I don't know if it will, but I really do hope that it backfires on him, because it's about time that people realize that you can't beat us up, not just the LGBT community or the Hispanic community or the Black community or whatever. We are all people. We need to be treated like that. And you may not understand drag, but let me tell you, for the 27 years that I've been DJing and working in nightclubs, drag queens have always been my friends. I love drag queens. And the environment that they're in is a 21 and up crowd to begin with. So you're already used to that kind of, mentality. So when you're seeing those people outside, that doesn't mean they're going to be acting like that in front of your kids. They're not going to be, and if you bring your kids to a place that's 21 and up, maybe you should be thinking twice.
It's a perfect segue. We're getting ready to start June Pride Month and celebrate June Pride Month. I am broadcasting on the main stage at June Pride Month's Stonewall Pride Parade and Festival. And I've never been in a community where there are so many Pride events as what I've seen here in South Florida. First and foremost, do you think that that's a good thing? Have you ever been asked that before? There's like really a dozen real LGBT major events. Is that good for our community?
I guess we have so many people here. I mean, we have a huge LGBTQ plus community here. It's massive. And so if little communities want to come together and put their own together, I don't see a problem with it. I think there are a couple that are, or there is one at least that I know of that's out there that is masquerading as an organization like that. And it was started by a straight man who owns a production company and is making money off the community. I have a problem with that. But again, who am I to say? I say that the more pride, the more people that know that we're here and that they can understand more about LGBTQ people, I think the better.
Interesting. Well, let's go to the roots of where we got to today. And that's talking about the creation of Pride of the Americas. I understand that in 2018, Fort Lauderdale bid for 2020 World Pride. Interpride, the international organization that chooses the bids, chose Copenhagen. In May 2018, at the International Gay and Lesbian Travel Association, IGLTA, headquartered, by the way, here in Fort Lauderdale and Welton Manors, at their annual global convention, the Greater Fort Lauderdale Convention and Visitors Bureau announced the first ever Pride of America's celebration, which would be held in April of 2020. Now think about that date and what ultimately happened. Mike, how did the decision to hold Pride of America's come about? And just briefly explain to us how that decision was made.
It was simple. We did have a failed bid for World Pride. Part of our vision for World Pride was to bring attention to areas in the Americas, Latin America, the Caribbean, where Pride wasn't really as prevalent as it could be. It is starting to happen now, and I think we were timely in when we started because it was beginning at that point. And so we wanted to really show the world that there are LGBTQ people all over the Caribbean and all over Latin America that are being ignored. And we wanted this to travel to different cities every couple of years, opposite of World Pride.
You know, J.W. Arnold,
yes.
Of course you know well, I know well, was marketing and public relations at the time for Pride Fort Lauderdale. He talked about this moment of having Pride of the Americas, and he said, quote, "This is the first time that Pride of the Americas has been held, and it will be the first time. We bid to host World Pride in Fort Lauderdale, and we weren't chosen. But we decided what a great opportunity to take all that work and that creativity and the planning and turn it into an event that people can enjoy. And since Europe has Euro Pride every other year, we thought, why not create a festival that people can have in the Western Hemisphere every other year? So it might be in Fort Lauderdale in 2020, but it could then be in Brazil or Argentina, Chile or Costa Rica or Canada 2 years later." I'm curious, who was the principal organizational or voices to develop World Pride? I've heard many different.
World Pride, mean?
Yeah, to have Pride of the Americas.
I mean, we actually created it. It was, Hernan Valverde was the one that came up with the name. He was our board member at the time, and he didn't even remember he did. I said, "You were the one that came up with the name." So anyway, but it was just one of those things that it just matched what we were already envisioning to do.
Was it a collective decision, or was there
for all of us to do? Yeah. Well, I mean, our board liked the idea. It was presented to them. We had actually right after. This is the moment I think it's when it really clicked. Right after we lost, I was in tears. I felt like I had let down our community. I really did. I said that because I felt like we had a great shot at it. And I take things very personal, because I'm that's just who I am. I try not to, but I do. And so I went out, and our mayor, our county mayor there, Mayor Sharif, was there, and I was crying, and I apologized to her, and she said, "Why don't you just do this on your own?" And then it all clicked. That moment that she said that, literally it all clicked. And we all started talking about it. We came up with the name at that point. Within a couple of hours of losing our bid, I had already registered the domain. So it was a lot. It was a lot of support from the county, really believing in what we were trying to do. There was so much.
Meaning Visit Lauderdale?
Yes, Visit Lauderdale. Yeah. So they were just amazing. Yeah. And they still are. I mean, they believed in us and they stood behind us through the whole thing.
It was an ambitious plan. J.W. Arnold continued by saying, quote, "We're shooting for 350,000 people on Fort Lauderdale Beach, which would make Pride of the Americas one of the largest LGBTQ events in the history of Florida." We now know the actual results of what happened 2 months prior, COVID-19, 2 months prior to Pride of the Americas happening. COVID-19 pandemic shut the world down, and Pride of the Americas really never recovered. What do you think about looking back on the anticipation that maybe 350,000 people would come to Pride of the Americas, and what ultimately happened? Well,
I'm going to call this event math because it's really hard for people to understand. Every day that there's every festival day or every day there's an event, those people are counted. So if you had 10,000 people on Saturday and 10,000 people on Sunday, it could be 20. The same 10,000 people, but it's 20. So it's event math. Right. And I try to
every event does that.
It's unfortunately every event. Yeah. So it could have been 100,000 people that showed up, but
But to your point, clear, heard.
It still wasn't nearly the same.
Right. That's absolutely. And must have been heartbreaking.
It was. I mean, I noticed this back in May of 2022 that we were just at a point where this was not going to work. It was brought up to me by a couple of friends and said, are you going to have enough time to pull this off? And I said, I don't think so. We're going to have to talk about it. So I brought it up in our board meeting. I was really pushing it. I talked to everybody in advance. Unfortunately, they didn't see it that way. They thought we could pull it off. Pulling it off and doing it are right or two different things.
So, in terms of hindsight's always 2020.
Absolutely.
Was that the moment where you think things began to go awry? That there was the continued commitment to wanting to do Pride of the Americas, but you began to feel in your gut, now we can't do this. Is that true?
I don't think it was the moment that, because we could have still had a lovely event. It could have been better than it was. I just believe there were other things going on. We had a lot of internal challenges with new board members coming in that weren't.
I'm going to talk about that, because that's part of the all of the things, the transparency issues.
Exactly.
We'll talk about that. But Pride of the Americas is so much at the heart of today's conversation, and what has been talked about at Pride Fort Lauderdale for the past 6 or 8 months. In hindsight, do you wish after pandemic you would have taken it off the table and said, we're not doing Pride of America today? Do you think that?
I would have loved to be able to come up with another solution, but remember, we did have a sponsor who had the county who had a big part in it, and for us, we already refunded half of their money, and for us to do this again, it would have been financial ruins.
Okay, and all right. Well, I understand that. We'll dive into that. But before we get into all of the questions, the transparency issues for Pride Fort Lauderdale, let's talk about 2023. So we go approximately a year and 14 months after pandemic in terms of getting to the February implementation of Pride Fort Lauderdale this year in February of 2023. It happens, but lots of changes. I'm curious, just to simply answer the question for people that have, armchair quarterbacked Pride Fort Lauderdale for February. Were you happy with the parade? Were you happy with the ultimate footprint? Mm-hmm. Did you like Pride this year?
There were things. There were things I did like. What I liked is that we may not have done what we wanted to do, but we honored our commitment. We made it happen. The place was busy. The people were happy. We still had the headliner that we promised. I mean, when it comes to accountability, even though things weren't this wonderful thing that we wanted, which we didn't even paint the picture that way after 2020. There wasn't a picture like that was anything near what we were going to do. It was definitely going to be scaled back. We knew that going into it. But this particular event happened, even in the footprint that we like. I like the footprint after all. It actually turned out really nice.
In the Las Olas Park.
Yes, the Las Olas Oceanside. I'm sorry, not Oceanside, but the Intracoastal Park.
Right.
I really like that park. It was good because it was contained. A lot of our expenses come from being on the sand. The city charges $30 a space now for parking. So you start doing the math. If you have to have 428 spaces or whatever, that starts adding up. When you have $150,000, $180,000 that you're going to have to spend in parking, that makes it impossible to do an event properly on the beach.
And how about the parade? Were you happy with the parade?
I'm happy we had the parade.
Okay, that's a pretty low bar of viewers. Let's make sure.
I'm being honest.
I'm going to push the transparency issue every step of the way.
Absolutely.
The low bar is it happened, but did you like it?
I wish we would have. I didn't personally get to see it, but I do know how many contingents we had. I'm happy that the people that we did have were great. I'm not happy as far as I think we can do more.
Yeah.
And I know we can do more. And I know that our future will definitely show that we've made a concerted effort to change that.
It's interesting in the compare and contrast. I broadcast on It's Happening Out at the time, the Fort Lauderdale parade going into the evening, late
the first year, 2019.
The first year of 2019, and Dean Trentellis was on our panel as we were doing it, and I had never seen anything like it on the beach. It was just amazing that it was at A1A. So it definitely has the bones of greatness, but a lot of things after pandemic. Our viewers know, for 8 months there was significant changes in Pride of Americas, Pride Fort Lauderdale. I'm using both names because they were transitional. And there were significant transparency questions that began appearing about the nonprofit 501c3 before Pride and after Pride. Now remember, our footprint date is February of this year, 2023. This is, as I said at the top, an outstanding opportunity to talk to Miik Martorell as president to clear the record. So let's just go right through it. All of the things that I have read in the press and in the gossip, and in the gossip I mean Facebook, because there's lots of journalists in Facebook. I'm sure you know that, right?
The journalists.
Okay, right.
Here today, gone tomorrow.
Okay, all right. Let's discuss first off the Pride Board. I want to begin with conversations about the Pride Board itself. Resignations started early in the year, really at the end of 2022, and they continued leading up to Pride. And since, I understand, all board members have resigned, and the only board member is currently you as president. Is that correct?
Okay, well, first, I'm going to answer all those questions, but I've heard about a dozen times about transparency. I want to make it abundantly clear. Just because somebody puts it in an article or puts it in a title doesn't mean it's true. It does not. I have a big mouth. As you know, as anybody who knows me knows, the last thing I am is going to hide things. And our organization has never hidden anything. At least as long as I've been involved, we haven't. It's really interesting because every one of our meetings, there's the budget's there, all the information is there. Anybody from any organization, even if you pop in just for that day, for that meeting, you're going to see and hear everything. And there's no filter. There's nothing to hide. Because even if we do make mistakes, we're human and mistakes can happen. Nothing's done with malice, no matter whether we agree or disagree with each other. So I just want to clear that up because it really isn't about transparency. It's about not understanding.
Okay.
And that I'm happy to clear up.
Okay.
So back to your original question, which was
the board.
The board.
Right.
So you wanted to know how many, yes.
I read that there is no one on the board now. So, you're the only, as president of Pride Fort Lauderdale, you're the only person on the board. Is that true?
As of this moment, I am the last board member. Now, just like with any organization, we're going to have to rebuild, and we're in a rebuilding state.
Oh, wait, I want to talk about that in a moment, in a little greater clarity, but. The thing that interests me next, if you're the only board member, is why do you think this happened? I can't recall a situation like this where basically over the course of 6 or 8 months, an entire board has departed and resigned. Why do you think this happened?
It's actually, it wouldn't be unreasonable to consider in this case. We had 2 people, Morgan and Ashley, who were on our board. Morgan had gone through some health issues, and his wife Ashley.
Morgan and Ashley Mayfair.
Mayfair, yes.
Right.
Literally, salt of the earth, most amazing people I could ever want. I consider them family. Literally, they're just that amazing. At some point, it was hard for all of them to do this and have to fight all the nonsense that's going on. Well, all the nonsense that's going on with the state trying to make their lives
trans. They lead trans social.
Exactly. I apologize. I'm basically talking like we know everything. But so for them, that was their reason for leaving. With Sean Palacios, he was having anxiety issues because the board meetings were contentious at many times. All the other board members that were on from before, all the other board members were all new board members that came on that year.
Which I want to talk about separately.
Yes. So just so you know that, so basically our core board members were, they all left for health reasons, really. So it's not unusual that things like that could happen. And then the other people, maybe for whatever reasons, their reasons for leaving, I'm not going to speculate. What they said and what might be the case are different. So it may be different. I don't want to speculate, but
you start down the path in terms of reconstituting the board. The bylaws are in place, and help us understand what comes next. How does the board get reconstituted? What's the process that's going to happen now?
Well, we're going to look at some of our previous board members. We are looking at some of our previous board members who have experience, who, according to our bylaws, have left in good standing and can come back. And if they come back, we can start reconstituting, recreating a board, because you need to earn your position on the board. That's the reason when a successful board works, is because everybody on that team has been there working together. And when you see somebody coming up in the ranks, you're more willing to work with them. When somebody just walks in the door and doesn't have that, it's a lot harder.
So talent from before have been invited to rejoin the board. In terms of a timeline to see some movement, I'm going to do a quote that Dean has done this week about the board. I know you're familiar with it. What kind of timeline are we looking at where more people serve on the board?
Well, I think the way we need to rework things is always shifting the importance to the work and not the board. What's happened in the past is people want to join the board because we keep saying the board, the board, the board. The fact is that the team that puts it together isn't always the board members. Many times it's the associates, it's the volunteers that have taken on a bigger role who don't want a board role. We need to focus on creating that team. We actually have a good team in place as it pertains to that. But bringing in new board members over time is the right way. We're starting probably within this month, in June, we probably will have our essential beginning board, the board of bringing back.
And define what that is. How many people does that mean?
It probably will be, to stay legally correct, it will be probably 3 people, because I can't say that we could get a whole group of people back. Many of the people that were board members are from well before. So, and the ones that recently left are unlikely to come back because of the issues that they had.
Okay.
But
so the goal is for June to have 3 board members, continue to reconstitute from there. That's what your goal is. Okay. All right. So that's the situation of the board. When this begins, let's say in the month of June, the board will meet weekly, monthly. What will it do?
I mean, generally, we try to meet monthly until we get 6 months out from Pride, and then it can go to bi-weekly or even weekly.
And that's your commitment of what you're going to do?
That's generally the way it's worked. Sometimes we start earlier, and it might be that we go to every 2 weeks, just starting out, because there's going to be a lot of things going on. I think it's more,
All right, let's talk about financial management of Pride. Lots of the story-related themes relate to money. Manuel Santos, which I think was identified as a treasurer, you correct me, resigned in January. Then, as you have explained, Ashley Mayfair resigned shortly after Pride, medical conditions and transsocial issues in that resignation. For the financial people that are on the board, why did they resign? Ashley, you've explained. The other person that we believe, Emmanuel Santos, which was associated with this. Why did Emmanuel resign?
So both of them were co-treasurers. Eman had come in towards in June under that. I can tell you what.
Meaning he came in with the group that came in. I see.
And I believe that was the reason.
Okay, and let's talk about that contextually later. I want to make sure. Okay.
So there's no.
That's the 2.
Correct.
He was part of the group that we're going to talk about, and then Ashley Mayfair, which you've already talked about.
Correct.
Your bylaws indicate that you have a particular procedure, and the reason I ask you about the financial issue is you have a particular procedure in terms of paying bills.
Correct.
The number of signatures for things that you purchase or you transact in your business. How are you able to do that right now? How is things being paid at Pride Fort Lauderdale?
First and foremost, there was some inaccurate information as to how the checks are supposed to be signed by 2 individuals. That hasn't happened in multiple years, maybe 6 years, since before I was involved. Since Norm Kent was involved, it was only 1 signature. So there is not 2 signatures required. That was inaccurate. And I actually discussed that before with the reporter to let them know. That being said, at this point, the only things that we're paying are bills that have been approved by the board, and not new bills. We're just going through, for example, I know we will discuss it later, but our executive director's pay, that's already been set up, that's already been approved. What is it called? The thing I was going to tell you about later, the drag queen bingo, that's been approved. These are things that we're not going to start doing anything until we have a board to make those final decisions. But these were ones that that we're already committed to. And that, according to our bylaws, is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to pay bills that our bylaws.
Making sure that I understand. So essentially you're saying you're frozen at where you're at right now, except for the things that had already been decided on and done
Basically.
by the board. And the issue in terms of multiple signatures, I've seen the bylaws. The bylaws do require, there is wording to require multiple signature. Now, whether the board has followed that since Norm Kent, for example, if that were the case, then the bylaws either need to be changed or you have to follow the bylaws.
The bylaws will definitely need to be changed, but I'm not sure where you're seeing those, because I went through them again today myself.
Okay.
And I know that there's a cash handling procedure, and that's in that part of the procedure. It shows that with the events that 2 directors have to handle that, because you want it to be verified, and then the treasurer is to ensure that the deposit goes in.
To be sure I'm clear,
Mm-hmm.
your observation is that basically you're in freeze. The things that you're doing are things that have already been decided and voted on, and you don't believe multiple signatures are required by the bylaws. I've got that right.
Yes, that is correct. And I will also add one thing to that. As far as the bylaws are concerned, there's at any point, and again, I can't find that. It may very well be in there, but we're not out there spending a lot of money anyway. We're really just, the vast majority of it is paying whatever bills were committed. There was something from Pride that was left over, an old bill that they still have to get paid. That was already pre-approved.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're not out spending money.
Well, and I understand your observation about transparency and commitment earlier. The transparency that I'm talking about is the criticism that people don't know about it, and they ask questions. And an example, you don't have to, and an example of that is your secretary in the minutes. It was discussed as early as 4 months before Pride that minutes at board meetings were not being taken or published as per requirements of the bylaws. I believe the secretary resigned 2 months prior to Pride. In the exchanges in the reporting that went on about how did you see what the board was deciding and how they were operating the business of Pride Fort Lauderdale, why weren't minutes being taken? Why?
Completely inaccurate, yet again.
Okay,
completely inaccurate. So just so you understand, we have to create an agenda so that we have a meeting. Otherwise, we're going into it not knowing anything that we're doing.
Right.
We take that agenda, we make additions or changes, we signify any votes that are taken, all that stuff. That happens every meeting. It's happened every meeting, every board meeting that we've had since I've been involved and since well before I've been involved. So I think there's misunderstanding, miscommunication. But
why do you think there's misunderstanding?
I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out why somebody would want to believe the worst when there's so many people that don't believe that.
So the challenge there, Mike, is if that is in the way you characterize it, where could I go and read the minutes? The meeting of February 1st, let's say. Here is the meeting was had. Here's what the agenda was. Here's the minutes of what was decided on these agenda items. Where could I find that?
So this is where there may be the reason. Back in 2016, I think it was, when we rewrote the bylaws. In fact, we used Las Vegas Pride as as part of the way we wrote them, because they had really good bylaws. Part of their bylaws were to put the minutes up on the website. Now, for the first 3 years or so, I handled that myself until the website got changed over, and I didn't really have the same access to do that. And since we didn't have a secretary, it's very challenging, by the way, to find a person who wants to do all the paperwork for a secretary, even though it's not as hard as it seems. They just don't want to. So that particular job wasn't there, so there was nobody handling it. We were all doing it ad hoc.
When that change took place to whoever was reducing your access and ability to continue that job, who was that?
Well, it wasn't reducing it. It was just the fact that it was, when we switched over to the Pride of the America site, we just didn't even think about putting it in there. And I think it was because it wasn't me that was putting it together. It was being, actually JW had put the site together. This is not against him, of course, but he was the one that had put that site together. And I didn't even think to tell him we need to add this to it. it's just one of those things. We hadn't had the problem.
If people wanted to go back and see minutes of any of the meetings, let's say over the last year, could they currently do that?
If they contacted me, they could.
Okay.
I know that according to our bylaws, you have to make them available so they can come to the office and take a look at them, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a desire or commitment through the Pride Fort Lauderdale website to make the minutes, the past minutes and the meetings, but definitely the meetings going forward? Do you have a commitment to wanting to publish the minutes so somebody doesn't have to go through that step? They can see them publicly, or do you not want to do that?
I have to say that. It's so hard when you tell people the truth, they read into it whatever they want. And so I'm not saying that we wouldn't do it. It is discouraging to me to have it up on the website for people to come take a look at and make their own observations and without asking questions. And then the next thing you know, we become a
But Mike, let me challenge that for
and I'm
viewers,
not saying you're right, yeah.
right? For viewers that are watching and saying, well, but don't make that decision. I just want to have access to read it, and I don't care what Miik Martorell thinks about why I do it, and I should have access.
I'm not saying that they're wrong. What I would do and what I will do is I will look at what legally is required, and we will stick to what is legally required.
Right.
And the reason is because then what happens if 1 or 2 weeks go by and I don't post, or somebody doesn't post, or something doesn't happen? Then we get the same problem again.
Right.
I'd rather have a consistent way that can be maintained. And I don't have a problem. The minutes are, every meeting, everybody who's in the meeting sees the minutes. They're being done while they're like literally showed up on the screen.
Right.
We're all going through them. So,
right. Okay.
Yeah. And we're not afraid to have people in meetings. You could always show up.
Well, actually, great segue, because I was getting ready to ask you that. There has been some criticism in circles, unnamed sources, let's just agree, unnamed sources.
Rumors.
Unnamed sources that say the visibility of the board meetings is not as transparent or clear in the sunshine as it should be. Can people from the general public, from our LGBTQ community, participate and go to a board meeting?
Yep.
Explain that.
They're done online right now. They're not, that might change. I will say that I love the internet, but I think when we're not working together, when we're not in the same room together, I think it does have a negative, feeling. We have more camaraderie when we're working together. So nonetheless, but we did have that, and we will have that again. And anybody's welcome to come to me. We've always been that way. I will say that we haven't been posting the meetings, so that doesn't necessarily mean that it may appear to be that they're not invited, but that's just a mistake on our part that we need to do.
You agree that that's a mistake to post?
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely.
So the go forward is post the meetings,
absolutely,
because you can participate in the meetings.
And that's the problem when you have a smaller board.
Yeah.
So you have to have the people to do the job.
Yeah.
And so that's what we are going to be doing.
Yeah.
Is changing that.
Actually, and I'm not throwing shade, but you had a paid executive director, and this is one of the jobs that a paid executive director could have done to eliminate this problem. So let's discuss that. Former executive director, Kevin Clevenger. Lots of gossip here. The gossip in social media was that there was a very significant conflict between you and the former executive director, Kevin Clevenger. First off, is that true?
We're like anybody.
I'm not talking about personal things. I'm talking about,
we have
was there conflict at Pride Fort Lauderdale?
Of course there's disagreements on things. That's not unusual. It doesn't change the fact that he's an incredibly dedicated, hardworking person. And when you're in an environment where you enjoy what you're doing and you're appreciated for it, you'll do well. And I think that's hopefully where he's at now. When he was with us, he was appreciated, and we wanted him to be successful, that we wanted everything. But there are going to be times we don't agree. He was one of the people that didn't agree with us pushing Pride of the Americas off another year. And he, to his credit, maybe he felt like that was because, we go back to the county, it's going to look bad. So, but we're allowed to have a difference of opinion. It doesn't mean that him and it hurt when we didn't agree on things, but that's just because I think we both wanted, we both saw it differently. So.
So let's look at an example. You've referred to it already, but let's look at an example of the potential outcomes of a difference of opinion. There's been a lot of conversation about significant events that took place in the second and third quarter of 2022, with many new people coming onto the board. It has been suggested by multiple unnamed sources that it was designed to basically take over Pride. The bylaws apparently were not followed on how one gets onto the board in terms of length of service, etc. What do you think about this observation about Pride was, it was an attempted takeover of Pride? What do you think?
Wow. You know, I'd like to go, with something like this, I'd like to go on fact and not opinion. So, because I don't have anything that tells me that factually that's what was happening, I prefer to just believe that that's not what's happening. I mean, there were some uncomfortable situations, but you know, I can't speak to something that I don't know. The last thing I want to do is do what somebody did to me and assume.
Yeah, okay, understood, heard loud and clear. But then the follow-up is your bylaws were in place in terms of how you got on the board, and you apparently didn't follow those because those people got on the board that could not have qualified to be on the board. Why did you allow that to happen?
And I own this because we have a very specific way of people joining the board. You have to spend a year as an associate member. You have to do that. You have to learn. We have to learn from each other. We have to see if we're going to work together well. You have to see how our organization is. And whether you feel that we're the kind of organization you want to be with, and vice versa. Is this going to be, you know, fighting all the time, or we're going to get, you know, or you're going to work? You know, like some people come in, they think it's just, you know, they say things like they think it's a managing board, not a working board. Ours is a working board. You have to get down and dirty and do the work.
Why didn't you do that then?
Well, with this particular case, we had several board members that were already there. I'm one vote that I don't even get to cast unless there's a tie. So if two people out of three or four, or if four people are there and two people vote, that's the only time I vote one way and two people vote the other. That's the only time I get to even vote. I get to open my big mouth and push it, but it doesn't mean that I win.
Help us understand then the other board members that are voting to expand these new seats onto the board that don't have, according to the bylaws, the time qualifications to do it, but also the philosophical changes that were going on at Pride Fort Lauderdale because they were coming on to the board. What the standing board members that began to do that, why did they do that then?
I think one or two of them knew one of the people coming on well. Another, and again, this, I shouldn't do an assumption, but I'm thinking that was the reason because they were introduced. And then, you know, if you're in a situation, sometimes you see, well, we need help. And I think we all felt like we needed more people to help. But I felt very uncomfortable when this was going on, not because these were bad people. I don't know who they are, really. I really didn't know who they were. So coming into a brand new group of people and literally taking half of your board coming in at one time, it swayed the board's vote. So
in experience, in viewpoint, in terms of not being part of the Pride of America philosophy, in terms of not living through pandemic, in terms of not living through the money that was seeded from Visit Lauderdale and all of the other organizations.
Absolutely.
I start with Pride of the Americas and try to set up the story here of how this all evolved. Now you're at real crisis moment at this moment.
Crisis is probably... A crisis is at the end of the day when we didn't have any solutions.
Okay.
I just don't want to I mean, this point we were beginning what could have ended up being far worse. And at the end of the day, it wasn't perfect, but we still have an organization, and we're still here, thank goodness. But
okay, so in this transition circle of what happens, he resigns. Kevin Clevenger, as executive director, resigns. But
this is towards the end of the year.
Yes, it was toward the end of the year of 2022. Pride is now going to be in February of 23.
Correct.
A lot of conversation in circles, media reporting, and the gossip is the board, and presumably Miik Martorell, doesn't accept his resignation until after Pride. Why did you do that?
That's not what happened.
Okay, explain it to us.
What happened was he requested to stay on until 2 weeks after Pride. Actually, was it 2 weeks? Yeah, 2 weeks after Pride. No, 3 weeks. The first week in May. I'm sorry, March. He wanted to stay on to the first week of March, so that way he can make sure that all of the sponsors, because his job was to bring in sponsors, his job was to bring in revenue, help us with the event, that all of the sponsors were taken care of, and that all the money that we were supposed to get was all brought in. So we had a debate on this, and some of us agreed, some of us didn't agree, some of us didn't agree the amount of time. Whatever the case, the majority, which made sense, the majority voted to accept it. So
Except 2 weeks after Pride.
no, it was actually 3.
3.
So
Okay.
for him to continue and be paid until 3 weeks after Pride.
Okay.
To some extent, in retrospect, some of it made sense because we didn't have any contracts in place. We didn't have really any sponsor money in place. That some, but not all, that we were expecting. So yeah,
I want to make sure I'm clear here. You're going into November or December, 2 months before.
December's when it all happened.
Yeah, before you're leading to a threshold of about 60 days prior to Pride of the Americas, Pride Fort Lauderdale, and you're concerned about the contractual and the amount of money obligations that are going on. Is that right?
I was concerned in September of the previous year when I submitted the budget. I write the budget. I'm very detailed on my budget. Every single item, every single thing that we pay for, I've worked really hard and I'm very proud of it. I'm very frugal. So I make sure that every penny that's spent is respecting the community's money. And that's the way and our group feels it's the community's money. So we were at a point where we could not have a $900,000 budget. I went on for a couple of months telling the board, we got to figure this out. We have to figure it out. And then everything really comes together in December when they start to realize, the end of November, beginning of December, when they start to realize, hey, this is too far off of where we need to be and we don't have the sponsorships to cover it. We need to find other solutions.
Is that why he resigned?
I can't say that's why he resigned. I can say that the last suggestion that he made was to move it to a different venue. That venue wasn't available, and then he resigned after that. So I don't know if that says anything, but it's what happened. And that's, like, I would love to be able to get in somebody's head and say it, but then who am I to do that?
Mm-hmm. I'm curious in this issue, at the end of the day, you went through this process, difficult inheritance of what happened on World Pride, crying at the announcement at Enterpride's decision on Copenhagen, the transition and the excitement of what Fort Lauderdale is going to do with World Pride, pandemic hits, the issues of the transitions of post-pandemic. We come to this event and these incredibly disappointing events and things that occur that you just talked about. Was Kevin Clevenger the right person as executive director for Pride Fort Lauderdale?
I think that's something that the community can decide. I think he had a lot of heart. He did a lot of wonderful things for us. He works he really works hard. I mean, he does. And I'm not here trying to make enemies or anything. I don't want to be negative. I really do. If there is a time that I cared about him, then there should still be a time I care about him. And I care for him to be, and if this wasn't a good fit, it wasn't a good fit. That does happen.
Understood. This whole area of the board and the things that we have just talked about and your executive director, anything you would have done differently through this process?
Yeah, I would have absolutely not allowed I would have figured out a way in the bylaws to not allow all these people to come on at one time without some real good reasoning, because I don't think that it was the right thing for us. I think that was the worst part of what happened last year.
You pushed me off a little when I said the second quarter and the third quarter of last year was really the fundamental issue of what really changed everything. Now you're saying that was it.
That was the beginning of it. Yeah, the crisis, you want to call it that.
Okay.
That was, I mean, because even then we still had a chance to fix things. Things could have worked out, but I just don't think that, you know, like part of that time we were, you know, I was trying to get them to understand technically this isn't right. and I spent 2 months doing that, but it didn't work out.
Yeah. Okay. A couple of other things that have appeared that I'm curious about. Let's talk about tax returns. I've read there is an ongoing reporting by SFGN's John Hayden that Pride hasn't filed a tax return since fiscal year 18-19 per the IRS. Simply, is that correct?
No. We filed everything up to 2022. We were completely up to date. If you go to the actual website for the IRS, you'll see right there that it shows a date, update, delay, and it actually just explains. And how I found this out is because I was looking up ours and looking up others to see before even the reporting was done, believe it or not. And that's what popped up there. And I realized, like, wait a minute, why is it nobody is filed after the 2019? So that's it. They're just...
So unequivocally,
100%.
It's been filed.
Yeah.
And this week is the deadline for the filing for 22-23, which
that's already been done.
And it is completed.
It's 22 because we're
I didn't.
So that's done.
It's complete. Okay.
That's been turned in already.
Right.
So
okay. Even asking the questions on the tax return with all of the other related issues, you can understand why people begin to reach and start discussing all kinds of other kinds of things because of confidence of transparency. You understand that, right?
I understand why people would ask questions. What I don't understand is when someone is given answers, why they wouldn't use those answers or at least investigate to see if those answers are right and publish headlines that are irresponsible.
Yeah, I want to talk about SFGN but we'll in a moment. Money issues. Let's dive into that for a moment. And perhaps this is the key issue of the transparency conversations that go on over Pride Fort Lauderdale. And I want to ask you about 2023 Pride of Americas and the financials and all of the things inaccurate, if they're accurate. First off, let's talk about Visit Lauderdale. They seeded a substantial amount of bed tax money into Pride of the Americas. How much did they pledge in Pride of Americas?
$500,000.
So that $500,000 is an accurate number. After the pandemic and the changes that were going on, I've read so many things, likely much inaccurate. How much did they ask back?
They originally asked for the entire amount back. I think it's because of the way they have to be able to show that the money was used for something. And they couldn't because nothing happened. We were all in uncharted territory. So we worked together with them. It took a little while, but we negotiated and we were able to get it down to half that, which we initially offered. So the good thing is we were able to keep some of it, which we'd actually...
So Pride Fort Lauderdale returned $250,000 back to Visit Lauderdale, and the others, you had administrative expenses, you had travel, you had contracts that Boy George had
been partially... So we had spent money, absolutely.
Yeah, so you were allowed to keep $250,000 of the $500,000 that was done. That's correct? Right. And did they ever suggest through the process, I'm curious, from Visit Lauderdale, did they ever suggest that legal action could be taken against Pride Fort Lauderdale?
I don't remember them doing it, to be honest with you. But I want you to know that we were not the only event that dealt with the situation. They had other events that had the same situation, and they handled everything equally, 100%.
Okay. All right. And clear, you weren't being threatened. Pride Fort Lauderdale wasn't legally being threatened over the situation. Yeah. All right. So we're now 3 months after Pride. You've had plenty of opportunity to resolve the accounting and the facts. Help us in terms of understanding what happened in February. How did Pride do in terms of how much was spent, the revenue that was generated, the expenses, or is there a pot of money for future Pride Fort Lauderdale? Was there a loss? What happened from February?
Well, I guess the best thing would be to let you know what our revenue or our expenses were. And there might be a couple of more things that have come in, like, believe it or not, trash that hasn't been accounted for here. But we had 450,000, 349.66. That was our expenses on revenue of 481,510.69 with a surplus of 31,161.03. And that's what we've been using to move forward.
Yeah. So currently you have approximately $30,000, which is the base to start again for Pride Fort
There's
Lauderdale.
less than that, obviously, because we had expenses after the fact, paying salaries and paying Kevin's salary, such.
Okay. As news began reporting on Pride Fort Lauderdale and some of the issues that were being reported on and discussed in social media, it was reported that sponsors were beginning to back out. Is that true?
We had, because of the inaccurate reporting, and I'm going to make that, and because of that, one sponsor pulled out, specifically stated that they didn't want their name being, mentioned in a publication.
I have an obligation to ask you who that is.
I prefer. I'm not trying to be dismissive because I don't.
You can be dismissive.
Because at this point, if they've already told me that to respect them and not have their name out there, I don't want to do it again. But I'm sure if you look through, that was one of the things that they did get accurately. Okay. So in the publication, so I will give them credit for that. Yes, that was, and they just didn't want to be part of that. And that's what happened.
I read separately. Let's end that conversation, start a new conversation so we don't have any linkage to the two conversations. I understand that Community AIDS Network, CAN, Midland Medical, has asked for money back. Is that correct?
They have asked for a refund.
Yeah. Is Pride Fort Lauderdale, have they refunded Midland Medical?
No, we have not.
And do you intend to refund Midland Medical?
No, we do not.
Okay.
Would you like to know why?
Please.
Okay, because in our contract, it does not offer the option for someone to pull out, especially 2 weeks before the event, and demand or receive a refund. Those monies are allocated, and if we did that, if somebody got a whim, if all of a sudden, the governor decided to pull something and they decided they didn't want to be involved, we pulled their name out, we honored every other thing, but we can't give you your money back because we've committed that money.
And you make that statement here in the show in that you want to go on record. This is it. Even if we risk you being unhappy with us in the future, that's your final decision.
Well, it's
Pride's final decision.
Yeah. Well, this is a decision that's made with, obviously seeking legal help. It's really important to understand that we don't want negativity. We would love to work with them again. We would love to make things work out. We would love to find a way for that. And we did try to find a way to, include them in the future, and find some, but they weren't interested. And for whatever reason, that's what it is. And we can't give money back. It's not that we don't want to set a precedent. We can't afford to. We don't have the money to give back.
I understand.
And it wouldn't work.
Okay.
And by the way, they didn't complete their contract. They were supposed to give us another $25,000, which they never gave us. So we looked at it kind of like they've got part of their money back. And,
you add that, and I just for clarity, I read repeatedly that Midland Medical, which becomes CAN, made a multiple year commitment to. Did they do that?
Both of them did, yeah.
Yeah, and that is off.
I would absolutely assume so.
Yeah.
I haven't called to respond to that.
Yeah,
so,
okay,
yeah.
All right. Other debt that we've read about that I want to get, I want to hear your answer, or your explanation about.
Sure.
I hear former executive director Kevin Clevenger is owed money. Is that true?
Absolutely not.
He is not owed any funds.
No, he received all of his, he received everything that he was supposed to receive. That all happened with our treasurer and with Morgan and Ashley still in place. We handled all that before, so he's been paid.
If anyone could see proof that it's being discussed in the month of May that debt is still owed, would that surprise you?
That is still owed to him? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it would surprise me. Absolutely.
It would surprise you. Okay, fine.
And if anybody would like to show me, I would like to know what it's for. It may be a discussion as to how much he thought he was supposed to receive, and compared to, and this is because he would receive I don't want to call it a bonus, but it was like a bonus for bringing in sponsors certain sponsors. So, and we had that as part of our, which we probably won't do that again, but we had that in the how do you call it, in the contract with him. But he put in the contract, he miscalculated one that had already been paid that was taken out. So things like that. So it wasn't far off from what he originally assumed he was supposed to get, but no, and he's never said anything. He should have said something if he had a problem with it.
Okay, he has not spoken to you that any money is owed to him?
No, he has not contacted me or Ashley or Morgan that I know of with Ashley and Morgan for me, for sure.
Yeah, okay, I understand. And to close the conversation about money, any other debts that you're aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. We took out a loan so that we could pay the Convention and Visitors Bureau back. We took out a loan with the SBA because it was the only time that we'd be able to do it. We wanted to make sure that the Convention and Visitors Bureau, or Visit Lauderdale, knew that we were committed to paying them back, because what they originally had was a 3-year deal where we paid them back so much at the end of each year. That would have been devastating this past year. So I'm happy that we did it this way, but now we have 30 years to pay that off.
Yeah, so you've taken an SBA loan for the $250,000.
For, I think, 200 actually.
Okay, for 200. Okay, so they've been paid 50.
They've been paid. No, they've already been paid everything.
Yeah. Wait, but 200 of it came because of the SBA loan.
Yes. Correct.
And Pride Fort Lauderdale can pay off the SBA loan over 30 years. Okay, I understand. I haven't heard that before.
But it makes sense, because the fact is that if we had to have a $50,000 balloon payment here or whatever, we did pay them half to begin with, but pay it back. But it just made more sense for us financially to be able to stretch that over time.
Yeah, okay. We're bursting bubbles for queer people all over that are listening to us that think Pride is unicorns and rainbows.
I wish. Something? No, it is. Let me not say that. It really is. This is not a big deal.
Okay.
At the end of the day, people are going to disagree. When you walked out to Pride this year, you had to feel a magic. My mom, 77 years old, the first time she's ever been to a Pride.
Yeah.
Do you know how that felt for me?
Yeah.
And how other people have that feeling?
Yeah.
That's what Pride's about.
Yeah.
Not
an SBA loan.
It's not an SBA loan.
You're correcting me. Al, you're concentrating on the wrong thing.
But somehow you're a great guy and you're a news guy, and I appreciate you. But I also want people to know that above and beyond all of this, we all have hearts.
Yeah.
And we all care about this immensely.
Yeah, let's talk about you. The other thing that I continually read and hear about is that you loaned $89,000 to Pride, and you paid it on your credit cards. Is that true?
So what happened is we were about 3 weeks away from, or maybe even longer, before our event. We didn't have enough money to pay for everything that was going to come up. And I mean, you have a big lump sum that you have to pay to Boy George. Then we have other staff and stuff that you have to have liquidity for. I brought it up to the board and I said, listen, the last thing I want to do is ruin my financial future, but I know that we're going to make the money back, door revenue from the bars. We're going to make it back. And also, I don't want to see us not have a Pride. We've gotten this far. It would be ridiculous. And then let's be honest, logically, it made no sense. If we had to cancel Pride, we'd have to give all the money back, and we didn't have the money to give back everything. So I said, are you okay with me using my credit cards to pay it back? So I charged $89,000 onto my credit cards, and thank God, everything worked out fine, and each of the credit cards was paid directly back from the Pride bank account. For that and everything, all the bills and everything.
Let me make sure that I've got this right. So you're going into Pride of the Americas, Pride Fort Lauderdale in February. There is great risk in terms of the amount of revenue capable. You're faced the choice of cancellation, the possibility of cancellation. So you have put $89,000. The board knew this.
They agreed. It was voted on and it was approved.
Yeah.
It would have never happened if not. Yes.
Okay. The board voted on the allocation of the money from your credit cards, and the $89,000 was repaid to you.
It was repaid directly to the credit card companies. I don't want anything.
You weren't even the middle person.
Yes. I don't want anything to do with me.
Yeah. So if it's Bank of America, they were directly paid.
Correct.
And you're not owed any money at this point by Pride Fort Lauderdale.
So that I make this abundantly clear, anything that I bring to Pride, I never ask for. I never get a reimbursement. I never ask for it. Anything that comes with printing is all donated for free from my company. I do not want there to ever be a doubt that I
You're
personally,
heard.
It's just because you see what happens.
Now
with
let me do which is what I'm getting ready to do. Let me do the news guy further, because I want to hear your opinion on it. Multiple sources, including 2 former board members, have said, unnamed sources, say specifically that you had requested that no questions be asked from the board on how the money was spent. Is that true?
I'm trying to think if there
were strings or conditions on the $89,000 is basically what they're saying. You can't ask me how I'm going to spend the $89,000.
Well, first of all, I didn't know what it was going to be. It could have been $15,000. So, no, I don't ever remember. That never happened. There was never a question about that. The only thing that ever happened when it came to discussing things is following our bylaws, which we tried to do. And there was only one person that's allowed to speak to the press, and that was me. Evidently, that didn't happen. And whoever on our board that did that, or whoever it was that discussed that, obviously got incorrect. And that's the reason we have this, because of situations like this. And it never happened.
Yeah. Okay. And
there's a receipt for everything. It matches up beautifully with everything. So I should have brought the folder.
Okay. Yeah. And all of this is available, public records. You're a 501c3, you're a Pride. If they wanted to see it, they could. The other thing that I'm curious in terms of the personal reaction from you, all of this malaise coming out of Pride of America, Pride of the Americas, the money from Visit Lauderdale, the refund to Visit Lauderdale, all of the related issues, the second quarter and third quarter issues with the board of people that came in that may have been trying to pursue various things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can at least understand why there would be so much what's going on. And as it relates to money, you can understand why people
I'm not mad because somebody asked questions. I'm mad when you spend 48 minutes on the phone with somebody a couple of times and they still don't use the information that you told them. That's very disrespectful. Yeah. And that $89,000, I spoke to a reporter about that a couple of months ago, and it never got mentioned. And I think that should show when it comes to the word of being accountable. That's accountability.
Yeah, and because I'm in that bucket too. I'm going to talk about the media in a minute, but I want to finally move to this transparency issue about moving forward. Are there any other related finance issues at Pride Fort Lauderdale that I should be asking you about or you want to discuss? Anything else that I haven't asked about?
The only thing that we're trying to do is find revenue streams. We go out and sell flags. We did it in Miami Beach. We brought in, great revenue from doing that. We're going to go do it again in Dallas. I know we did last year. Kevin was out there. He sold everything we brought, which was great. We're going to do that again this coming up year. We're going to be in Minneapolis. But again, all these are frequent flyer miles and stuff. So
I understand.
And it gets our executive director, who is already known by all these organizations anyway. Okay. It gets him out there and helps.
Let's talk about some relationships. First, let's talk about a relationship with the city of Fort Lauderdale. And I want to ask you about that because Fort Lauderdale is a city and Pride Fort Lauderdale are so intricately linked to make the Pride celebration important. And I want to ask about Fort Lauderdale. SFGN and John Hayden talked to Fort Lauderdale's gay mayor, Dean Trentellis, about Pride, and he seemed to express concerns. He said, I believe, just last week, quote, they are completely on their own. I don't understand what happened. What concerns me is that the group has disintegrated. Hopefully by this time next year, we will be able to see a reconstituted board with a lot of energy, end quote. What do you think about the mayor's comment?
I think he is giving us positive feedback, believe it or not, because he sees that he's trying to put positivity out in the atmosphere, and I agree with him. We're going to have a completely different group next year. We're going to have a group of experienced people, a fantastic executive director. Really, it's going to be an amazing event. I think what's different this time is we have people who have heart, who have been part of Pride for many years. It's really easy to put on an event when you have people that are like-minded, that we're trying to achieve the same goals.
And without going into the what's next, because we're going to talk about that, you, in terms of relationship with Fort Lauderdale, you're happy where it's at. You're not concerned about how the city is treating Pride Fort Lauderdale, the LGBTQ community.
Oh my God, I've said this. I go around the country telling people how fortunate we are to live in Fort Lauderdale. How fortunate we are. to have this in Fort Lauderdale, have the people behind us, they've been nothing but amazing every step of the way. They're caring, they're helpful. I mean, you just don't even, I can't even begin to tell you how fortunate we are to be where we are. And even if there are issues, we'll work them out, because they're nothing that is just misunderstandings. I don't think we have any, though. I mean, we've booked our dates 2 months ago with them, and they didn't talk about that. Yes, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll come back to that. Also, let's talk about the relationship with Visit Lauderdale. Pride Fort Lauderdale and Visit Lauderdale is a symbol of LGBT travel to the gayest place on planet Earth. Richard Gray is an Out 100 recipient, the only travel-related recipient in Out's history of that prestigious award.
It's amazing.
And it's a reflection of Fort Lauderdale and Broward County and Visit Lauderdale. What is the current relationship with Pride and Visit Lauderdale?
I mean, let me put it this way. First of all, for both Fort Lauderdale and for Visit Lauderdale, we haven't started our sponsorships yet, so we're starting now, but we haven't started them yet. So we can't tell you if they're going to be on board, but we will be calling them, and we hope that they will be, because I'm not going to predict anything. But they've been amazing. I mean, Stacy and Richard, I mean, from top to bottom, they've always looked out for us. They've given us feedback that we couldn't receive anywhere else. I mean, they're marketing marvels. So if anything we want is to have a great relationship with them. It's not just their money, it's what they bring to the picture. And so we've had a good relationship, and so far, everything seems to be going in that same direction.
Do you, I have to get it out on the table.
Sure.
Do you have any regrets that Visit Lauderdale was one of the biggest, perhaps the biggest cheerleader for Pride of the Americas? And as a result, if that wouldn't have been true, maybe we would have never tried to take on Pride of the Americas. Any disappointment in that?
No, I think what the disappointment was, when you have a lot of one organization putting in a lot to help you, you kind of still need to realize that things can happen and you're going to need more sponsors. And I think we should have been, because we tried to work with the sponsorship coordinator a couple of years ago and that didn't work out. So I think we should have moved the date back and tried one more time to get it right. But other than that, they're amazing. And I'm so appreciative and thankful that they've been supportive of not just us, but everybody in our community.
You know, at the end of the day, support of Pride Fort Lauderdale, opposition to Pride Fort Lauderdale as its relationship in representing this city and this county. I talk to people all over the world, and if I've said once, I've said literally 100 times, Visit Lauderdale and Broward County and Fort Lauderdale is the best LGBTQ plus travel destination in the world. Period.
No doubt.
Drop mic.
No doubt. You can't really, I mean, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to any other city or anything, but listen, regardless of what happens with, you know, in our environment with the state and with the governor, they're still putting their neck out for us. I mean, look at I was going to say our vice mayor, but, you know, I mean, what he's done for us and just speaking out.
Yeah.
You know, I'm afraid to speak out, to be honest with you, because if he'll go after Disney, I'm nobody.
Yeah, right.
I'm not even a Mickey Mouse.
Right. Well, join us at Queer News tonight. All right. Well, let's move on and let's discuss. You've seated it already in the interview, your new executive director.
Yes.
I think. I understand that there is a new executive director coming for Pride Fort Lauderdale, and his name is Ernie Ewan.
Correct.
Ernie Ewan. Is he officially the new executive director?
Yes. He's been our executive director. He was voted on by the board that was before, for what was it? I guess 2 months ago, something like that, and 2 or 3 months ago. And he flies in on my frequent flyer miles every 2 weeks, stays here for a couple of weeks, stays with my mom.
He's in Vegas.
Yes, he lives in Vegas right now. He's going to be moving.
Yeah.
But Ernie's had 19 years of experience with nonprofits, spending quite a bit of it as the executive director at President and then executive director of Las Vegas Pride. He works with Electric Daisy Carnival, EDC. He does high-end weddings. He knows events and he knows sponsorships.
Yeah.
And to be quite honest with you, he's been our mentor for many years. if you looked at our bylaws, you probably saw something by accident that was in there that says Las Vegas, because we
copy and paste there.
Yes, well, I tried.
Yeah.
We got as much as we could out, but Ernie, he's the fact that he's willing to stay in somebody's house to try to help us.
Yeah.
And I mean,
when will he start full time?
He's full time, but he comes in and stays here 2 weeks and then goes back. But he's still working.
Okay. And when
remotely.
is he moving? When is he planning?
Hopefully September.
Yeah.
So because it's going to take time. He's been there for
a long
many
time.
years.
Okay.
Yes. And he's Hawaiian, which Pacific Islander. So again, I like the fact of
diversity.
The diversity.
Yeah.
And he speaks from a different place, which might be really exciting.
It will. We're going to talk more about it. I'll ask for your reaction. It will not surprise you. We're LGBT after all, so there's various opinions.
Yeah.
And reach out. Ernie, as Mike said, is in Las Vegas, and worked for Las Vegas Pride for years. This week, there's the inaugural edition of Out South Florida, which is the inclination of the evolution from SFGN. And they have an interview with John Hayden and the current president of Las Vegas Pride, Brady McGill. He expresses concern on the hire at Pride Fort Lauderdale. And he said, this is coming from the article that has been published, quote, Ernie tends to play the role of expert, which is dangerous when you're working with tax codes. There are places where you take on more than you should. There should be CPAs. I don't think Ernie Ewan should be in charge of a nonprofit. I would tell them to watch their backs. Over the years, he made a lot of enemies and doesn't have a big fan club, end quote. Now, I don't know him. I don't know any of these details. I'm curious, with your eye and your seat of your knowledge at Pride Fort Lauderdale and Las Vegas and around the country, what's your reaction to that? Is that fair?
I know Brady. I also know that Brady and him had some disagreements. So, God bless Brady. I think he's wrong. And I would be happy and probably will tell him, call him up and tell him myself. I think it's wrong because, ironically, when I was there and volunteered many times, it was one of the most organized parades, if not the most I've ever seen in my life. That was just one of the multiple roles. He has a way of bringing people together. He has a way of bringing groups together and creating this really wonderful working group that was there, and it felt like a family instead of an organization. That's pretty substantial. And people just like Kevin, by the way, Kevin and myself and many others were, Rocky Bowell, who was with our group, Sean Manning, Sean Palacios, all of us absolutely adore him. He is a great guy. If Brady had a problem, God bless him, I hope everything's fine with him. I completely disagree with him. And I guess I'm going to have, with the new publication, more John Hayden stories. And I would like to say, bless his heart.
Yes.
Bless his heart.
All right. I'm a Southerner, so I know what that means.
Yeah,
all right.
Me too.
So I'm looking forward to a meeting, I have not. It gives us a good transition to talk about the blame game.
Yes.
It's something that goes on in LGBT in so many fashions. The things that have been said about me over the years, just wait. Believe me, I know exactly this environment. But let's discuss the blame
true.
game.
You probably do.
I do. I want to take a moment to talk about you personally and your personal feelings as being president of Pride Fort Lauderdale. These grand plans of Pride of the Americas, being president of Pride Fort Lauderdale, everybody that left seems to be talking about you, and some of them are blaming you for Pride Fort Lauderdale. Some in the community are blaming you for the issues that have taken place from Pride of the Americas to today. What do you think about all of that, of people talking about this behind your back, anonymous sources, both in social media and in official press? What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's to be expected from somebody who was on the board before, to not be happy that things didn't go their way, and to have a little bit of, have something to say about it. I don't want to to be upset with anybody. Just because two people don't see things the same way doesn't mean that we have to hate each other or that it makes us bad. We just see things differently. And it's my opinion that there were things that we could have done better. I'm one of those people that want us to stick to the rules. And I mean, if I told you some of the things that were being brought out there about, not having contracts and things like that, I mean, these are things that we all should be voting on contracts. We should know what our expectations are. And this is what some of the board members wanted. It doesn't make sense to me. Oh, you're just trying to micromanage. Well, micromanage or manage. Manage is the word I was looking at. And it's sad, but it's okay. I just hope that I wish them the best, and I hope that they will still have, they'll wish us and wish Pride the best in the future. That's my hope.
I've asked this question 25 times. Why don't they come out and speak on record? Why don't they do that?
Even if they did, and I'm not trying to, but even if they did come out, it could still be a difference of opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they could come out and say anything they want, just like I can. I think that when you hear both sides, you're better informed. Mm. I know what happened. I speak way too much. I love to talk, but I also love to make people happy. So the last thing I want to do is upset people. I don't want them to be upset with me. I don't like having enemies. I don't like having negativity. I want us to all be able to come back next year and fly rainbow flags or trans flags or whatever and just be happy.
Mm. I said we're delving here at the end about the personal. It's 5 years, 5 years since the loss of World Pride and the creation of Pride of the Americas and everything in transition that we saw leading to February. I ask you, did you like it? And
I actually did like the Pride. I'm going to be honest with you. I liked when people walked in, they got to see a history of the different Pride flags. That was something I wanted to do for a long time. Ernie made that happen.
Yeah.
The different trans history. It was like we tried to do things that really added some educational aspect to it.
Yeah.
And then the event itself.
You may be answering the question faster than I asked.
I'm sorry.
Because at the end of the day, all of the issues of these transitions and pandemics and the fights and the board attempts of whatever that was and the money and executive directors and aren't you tired of it all?
Are you asking me whether I'm going to stick?
No.
I'm tired of unnecessary drama, but I'm also not a quitter. And it's not about whether it's me, it's about the situation we're in. I could say, throw my hands up in the air and go, okay, I'm done. And close it down.
And why not do that? Why not just go, this is just
And
too
some
much.
people close down organizations when the chips are stacked against them. But this is a 47-year-old organization, or we're going in our 47th year. Who am I to make that happen? And it's not going to go down under my watch. We want to hit 50. We're an important part of our community. We were around when Anita Bryant that's how we started, because of Anita Bryant. Save Our Children. Oh my goodness, we have a similar Save Our Children thing going on right now. Are we going to let our current governor be a winner by seeing us fail and go down? No, we have a lot to be here for. And we are a good organization with really good people that care. And by the way, just because the board is small, there's still all the other people, the volunteers, there's all the staff. There's hundreds of people that make this happen.
You give us a perfect opportunity to discuss your future as president of Pride. I assume you're not going anywhere?
I have to finish getting a group together. At some point, I'm not going to be here forever, and I'm not attempting to be here forever. I actually was considering leaving last year. So, this would have been my last year, but obviously things changed.
One of the things that, the rumor stuff about you, one of the things that I've heard repeatedly is that you actively own big portions of the infrastructure, websites or branding or imaging or fill in the blank, whatever it is. Is that true?
Well, let me be clear. I do have things that I bought that I donate for Pride to use. But I also house, not as much as I used to, I house a lot of the stuff that Pride rents out. Like, for example, we rent out coolers. Because we make money on those coolers, they offset our cost. It lowers what our costs are. We own tablecloths at one time. We had the bars.
So what you're saying is people are confusing the mixture of Planet Printer and storage space, etc.
Well, the storage space, I separated that now. It's just, because I honestly would like to wanted it out of my warehouse because it was taking up a tremendous amount of space, and we have a really big spot that actually Kevin found, and it's a great spot. The problem though is that the coolers are going to be hard to fit in there because there's 30 of them, or 20 of them, so that's a lot. But still, we make revenue off of that. Pride makes revenue off of that.
So
and they don't have to pay for the stuff that I have myself that I donate.
Yeah.
But I think that's great.
Yeah, I understand. We're discussing what happens next. So you're not going anywhere. You're reconstituting a board. Pride's going to come back. It'll be the 48th, and you've got to get it to 50.
47. I think it's
47. Okay.
Yeah, because 27.
Okay.
What is it?
All right.
2026 is the
and
yeah.
You've told us you want to get it to 50. I do definitely want to talk about the future. Let's break the news. Either way, I have absolutely no idea, but sources say that the dates have been set with the city of Fort Lauderdale for dates for Pride Fort Lauderdale 2024. Is that true?
Well, I'm going to be the verifiable source here. Yes. Yes, we are absolutely going to be February 9th, 10th, and 11th. We're going to introduce a night parade, which I wasn't going to tell you that until now, but now you know. I was going to wait a little bit, but we're going to have a night parade again, so hopefully that'll be exciting. And one of the days is going to focus just on the parade and a street festival, similar to what we did the first time.
And the parade is going to be where?
Same place, A1A.
Yeah.
The park. We're going to be in the park probably one more year at Ocean or not Oceanside Park, but the other park, Las Olas Intracoastal Promenade Park. Yeah.
Promenade, right?
So we're going to be at that park this coming up year. We have to figure out how we can move back to being on the beach, because as long as the cost of the parking, we have to use that. Unfortunately, we have to use the parking, quite a bit of it. So it makes it really hard. Some events don't really need the parking, but we actually utilize a lot of it. So we'll have to figure out a way through that.
Yeah, and so the festival is going to be 2 days. The platform for the weekend is going to be similar to what we saw this year, except the parade moves as to a nighttime function.
To a nighttime function, it will be on a separate day. The parade will be Saturday, and then Sunday will be the festival. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And then there will be a Friday night.
Are you excited about that?
Yeah, I am. I really liked that year. For one, it was hard this year because we don't get to actually sit out and help the parade. We don't get to actually produce it. When we're there and we don't have to worry about the festival going on at the same time, it makes it a lot easier. So, and I think it's going to be fun. It's Noche de Carnaval Parade. That's what it's going to be called. And it is, and again, it's going to be really exciting. And we're going back to our Love Pride theming, which was really fun and amazing. So
February 9th to the 11th, 2024, featuring a Saturday night parade on Gay 1A. Yeah. Right. Okay. Very exciting. Last thing, I'm curious.
You did say there's other things coming up before then. That's 2024. We have the 14th, Wednesday, June 14th, our first drag charity bingo, and that's going to be at the Pride Center. And then we're going to have it once a month, the first Thursday of every month from there on.
So the plan in terms of fundraising and visibility is to do things through the year and have events. Will you be doing Halloween again?
We're not sure. I'm not going to say we're not. We haven't really put that planned out, but we have something coming up very soon before that. On the 30th of September, we're going to have Pride Pets. And so Pride Pets is going to be... it's going to be an event that focuses on the wonderful pets that bring us joy every day. And we're going to engage pet rescues and other pet-oriented businesses to be there. And it'll be a place that you can bring your pets to, which I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Well, I now know that Miik Martorell is staying on as president of Pride Fort Lauderdale because he's going to try to jam into every single event over the next 12 months in this interview.
We have to.
I know.
We have more. No, there's so much more.
We'll be talking about all of that on Queer News Tonight, at Hotspots Magazine, so many other places. I guess last question for you. I'm curious, for you in terms of what you've gone through, at least in the last year? And then, by the way, there was pandemic before that. What have you learned through all of this?
I've learned that as much as I want to believe that people are innately good, that they're not always innately good, and you have to trust your gut. I really do give people the benefit of the doubt way too often, and for me that's a problem. What I know I'm going to do now is I'm going to trust my gut. I'm going to stick with the people that have proven themselves to be good, and make sure that, you know, I'm not going to feed negative energy or negative people, and we're going to have an amazing event. But personally, it hurt. It really did hurt to have so many people let you down, you know, but that's okay, because we have an amazing year ahead, and this is part of the learning process, you know?
Yeah. Well, one thing is clear in my conversation with Pride Fort Lauderdale's president, Miik Martorell. We are living in challenging times with a presidential candidate that is trying to erase our community. It seems to me we can't turn and eat on our own, and I think that's what I just heard. But that does not mean the only LGBTQ plus news is good news, because it isn't. It's just news. And we can't be a great LGBTQ community if we only want to report on great news. Understand the difference. Supporting the LGBTQ plus community is reasonable and measured critique, factual, accurate, fair. I will broadcast the Stonewall Pride Parade next month, in June Pride Month, as it faces so many critical issues beyond whether we hold the largest queer festival in Florida. Pride of the Americas is finished, both as a concept and in its results. Our need now is for Pride Fort Lauderdale in South Florida, and it is not finished. Perhaps we will remember this and use today's conversation as a starting point to achieve that goal for 2024. Miik Martorell, thank you very much for joining us at Unapologetically Queer.
Thank you so much, Al, for allowing me to be here. I really do appreciate it.